Well, welcome everyone, bienvenue, and thank you to End Water Poverty for hosting this webinar, to the representatives from the National Human Rights Institutions, the NHRIs, in the Côte d'Ivoire and South Africa, and to the members of civil society that are joining us from Nigeria and Niger. We're able to offer you this webinar in English and in French, so please tune in to the translation of your choice at the bottom of the screen. Nous sommes en mesure de vous offrir ce webinaire en anglais et en français. Alors, s'il vous plaît, syntonisez la traduction de votre choix en bas de l'écran. So today, we'd like to present to you the launch of our new publication on the compilation of good practices for NHRIs and water governance. NHRIs are independent bodies that hold an important role to protect all human rights. They more traditionally support civil and political rights, but with the advent of some of the socio-environmental rights in the last 10 years, their basket of responsibilities has expanded. Importantly, they provide a welcome body for people to talk to if they have concerns over the protection, respect, or fulfillment of their rights. And it's in this capacity that they can really help with the improvement of access to safe and sustainable water and sanitation. At Human Right to Water, we have a long-standing and supportive relationship with NHRIs, going back 8 years to the start of the first edition of the manual that we're launching today. Don't forget that the human rights to water and sanitation were only recognised by the UN General Assembly 10 years ago, last July. So there were many NHRIs that still did not have the experience of working in this area. There's been some real progress in the last 5 years, with many examples of NHRIs that are working to support the human rights to water and sanitation. But sadly, they have their work cut out. When we still have less than half the population with access to improved sanitation in many countries, it's not a surprise. The path to fulfillment of these rights is a long one. The first step is to help women and men to understand what we mean by the human rights to water and sanitation and what it means for them. This is where education and communication is important, and NHRIs can be good at communicating. The second step is to provide a means for people to complain when their rights are violated so that something can be done about it. In this respect, a robust complaint system with follow-up can provide a pathway, and NHRIs are also able to set up monitoring systems like this. And thirdly, when the problem is identified, someone needs to work with the government to find a sustainable solution so that it doesn't happen again. This is the tricky part and requires having the ear of government and providing supporting information to encourage reform. This is where NHRIs can also provide support. Importantly, for NHRIs to do their job well, they need civil society to be cognizant of their role. One of the purposes of this publication and this webinar is for people to see the role that NHRIs can play. We also hope that by sharing some of the NHRI good practices, we can also encourage other NHRIs to be more involved in the human rights to water and sanitation. Our next speaker is Imanol Aguilera. He has been the lead researcher on this new publication and is one of our experts in understanding the roles that NHRIs can play. He's going to present to you today an introduction to the compilation of good practices, and he'll highlight some of the case studies that mark this approach or make this approach interesting and helpful. Imanol.
Thank you, Amanda, and hello and welcome to all the panelists and everyone joining us online. Before I begin, I would like to give a special thanks to all NHRIs that contributed to this manual, and also to our colleagues from End Water Poverty for their precious support. It was a real pleasure working on this publication, and we hope it will provide some useful information and food for thought. So I would now like to provide some additional context to this compilation and provide a few case studies to exemplify the type of practices that we aim to highlight in this manual. So more than 100 countries currently have national human rights institutions charged with investigating, promoting, and protecting human rights. This compilation works on the assumption that these should play a central role in contributing to the implementation of human rights-based governance. There is an emerging set of NHRIs worldwide whose work has made real improvements in water governance, serving as an encouraging example for other institutions. So for the purpose of this compilation, practice is defined widely, and it encompasses both policy and implementation. Therefore, practices include diverse initiatives that encompass legislation, regulations, policies, strategies, projects, and so on. A practice is considered good if it contributes to the realization of all human rights in the context of water governance. So we have decided to separate different good practices under 5 main themes. Regarding promotion, we have documented different ways in which water-related human rights have been advocated, for example, through awareness-raising campaigns, publications, or media interventions. In terms of protection, the compilation highlights how complaints and policy gaps have been investigated by NHRIs and how they have taken action to defend citizens' rights. Monitoring refers to the different methods through which allegations of violations and state performance have been kept an eye on, using different methodologies and ways of collecting data. NHRIs can also advise governments and parliaments through recommendations and guidance in order to improve their compliance with human rights. Finally, the section on cooperation and coordination addresses instances where NHRIs worked with various stakeholders during their activities. We will now look at each of these elements and mention a few case studies in relation to these concepts. Promotional activities may result in several beneficial outcomes, including informing citizens about their rights and empowering them to influence water governance. This can be done through several ways, notably by considering the interdependence of human rights in promotional activities, by publishing specialized human rights material on water governance, and by raising public awareness and educating the public on the rights of vulnerable people. The Procuraduría de los Derechos Humanos of Guatemala, for example, has been highlighting the central role of having access to safe drinking water in relation to the right to food in their annual reports on food and nutritional security. Moreover, the special importance of the human right to water is also highlighted in the Procuraduría's annual reports, in which a separate paragraph is exclusively dedicated to this right. The issue of protection now may be challenging for NHRIs. In several countries, it is reported that the rights to water and sanitation cannot always be protected in court. NHRIs can protect water governance-related human rights beyond tribunals, and investigating human rights violation is central to this role. They may seek possible remedies for victims and provide right holders with possible avenues to access them. In Hungary, for example, 2 ex-officio investigations are currently underway. First, the Hungarian NHRI initiated an investigation in April 2020 with special attention to thorough hand-washing requirements related to COVID-19. On the other hand, the Ombudsman for Future Generations also initiated a broader investigation on the fundamental rights related to access to water and sanitation, pushing for increased protection of vulnerable groups. Monitoring is a key aspect of the mandate of NHRIs. The compilation highlights innovative tools, techniques, and mechanisms which may inspire other institutions in keeping track of the evolution of human rights in their country. The South African Human Rights Commission notably went through a period of engagement with the Center for Economic and Social Rights on monitoring systems for economic and social rights under the Opera framework. It also has worked on indicators in partnership with the Australian National University over the last 3 years on an individual deprivation index. NHRIs are also responsible for advising their government on human rights issues. This contributes to making governmental bodies more accountable to violation and legislative gaps. Reporting, providing recommendations, and issuing opinions to parliaments offer NHRIs the opportunity to receive a hearing in the country's representative and elected body. Following floods in Abidjan in 2018, the Human Rights Council of Côte d'Ivoire notably published a report containing several recommendations for governmental authorities to ensure human rights were accounted for and upheld in governmental responses. NHRIs need to work alongside various bodies and stakeholders to effectively protect and promote human rights. Coordination and cooperation can be key elements of success. The Defensoría de los Derechos Humanos del Pueblo de Oaxaca in Mexico notably participated in civil society consultation processes and promoted dialogue with the Zapotecos people for modifying a presidential decree which precluded indigenous farmers from using their water resources. This process is close to being concluded with the modification of the decree, making it a potential success. In conclusion, this manual does not intend to present an exhaustive display of good practices. It can only provide a glimpse of the efforts that have been deployed and the lessons that may be drawn from this guide must be put into context and carefully analyzed. These experiences ought to provide human rights practitioners with some important knowledge about what legislative changes and activities have been carried out in different contexts and what has or hasn't worked in different settings. This compilation is also helpful in consolidating a community of practice of NHRIs willing to foster their role in water governance. Despite this joint effort, much remains to be done in terms of fully realizing the human right to water and sanitation. It is worth remembering that many obstacles prevent NHRIs from fulfilling their true potential, especially in light of the new challenges brought by the COVID-19 pandemic and climate change. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Imanol. This is great, fantastic presentation and giving us the overview of the report. So now we're going to hear from different countries' national human rights institutions, how they've been working around with civil society and people around the globe, and how to claim your right through the national human rights institutions. So the first person to hear from would be Peace Modi from South African Human Rights Commission. And just to reassure everyone that at the end, we would have question and answer session. So if you have burning questions, you could put them in the chat box, and at the end of all the presentations, we would get the presenters to answer your questions. So rest be assured that you would have the opportunity to speak. This is going to be an interactive session. So over to you, Peace Modi from South Africa Human Rights Commission. Can you unmute and then take over?
Thank you, Al-Hassan, and thank you so much. May I extend a hearty thank you to the Human Rights to Water and End Water Poverty for inviting the South African Human Rights Commission to what I consider to be an important occasion, where a publication which is quite crucial in the work of water, of the right to water, is being launched. As we all know, I mean, the right to water is indispensable for leading a life in human dignity. In fact, the high-level panel on water has said that water is actually a common currency which links nearly all the sustainable development goals in the SDGs. And the right to water is an enabler for a number of other human rights. But as we know, and in South Africa, quite specifically, we have got huge inequalities along race, class, and gender and location. And maybe just to briefly touch on the South African context. So in South Africa, the right to water is constitutionalized in terms of Section 27 of the South African Constitution. And there is also a number of legislative and policy documents which protect the right to water, as well as the right to environment and the right to sanitation. But as I've indicated, the country, and I think globally as well, we still battling with a number of challenges, such as lack of universal coverage, decreasing water quality, and as a result of aging infrastructure. I'll come back to this when maybe I just point out a case study which is not captured in the publication because it is something that we have done just quite recently. But maybe briefly to touch on what the South African Human Rights Commission is all about. The Human Rights Commission is a national human rights institution. It is established in terms of the South African Constitution, and it functions basically to promote, protect, and monitor human rights. And we've got a number of powers that are vested to us in terms of the Constitution and our empowering legislation. And such powers include the ability to investigate, the ability to carry out research, and the ability to also educate and build awareness and empowerment on the communities. All this is also captured in the publication, which is being launched today. And then with regards to the right to water, the Commission has done tremendous work with regards to this right, and that work is also documented in the publication. But maybe due to time constraints, let me rather highlight one example which is not captured in the report, and I thought I should share it with everyone because it is something quite novel and it is something quite recent. So we recently, as far back as early last year and 2019, we had an inquiry, an investigation, because as I indicated that we're an NHRI, we can receive complaints. So we had an inquiry into sewer spillages into the Vaal River. So the Vaal River is one of the largest rivers in South Africa and is an important water source because approximately 19 million people depend on the Vaal River for water, for drinking, for domestic and commercial use. And then we had received complaints through media that there was sewer spillage into the water resource, which is the Vaal River. And then we then decided to conduct an inquiry whereby we called state and non-state actors to bring submissions to the commission. And so that inquiry was quite comprehensive. And then during the inquiry, what was revealed was that there is really an abysmal situation in terms of human rights violation. As I think those who might follow the work of the UN Special Rapporteur on the right to environment, I think he's going to launch a report to the Human Rights Council 46th session, where he indicates, I mean, the interface between the right to water and the issues of pollution. So we picked up the fact that the water resource, that is the Vaal River, was being polluted, and it impacted on a number of rights, such as the right to water and the right to a healthy environment, and the natural ecosystem as well was being affected by the pollution. And quite interestingly, there is what we call the yellowfish, which is quite peculiar to South African rivers, and such as the Vaal River, which was the subject of investigation. And unfortunately, it's facing extinction because of the pollution. And so in the inquiry, we found out that there were a lot of violations, as I have indicated, that were taking place. And I think it was precisely due to the fact that there was aging infrastructure, which is one of the concerns that we had raised in our previous water and sanitation report in 2014, which is contained in the first publication that Amanda alluded to. And so we viewed this work as a continuation, and the issue of aging infrastructure is a huge challenge, particularly in South Africa, because municipalities have got, and the local government sphere rather, has got an important role to play in terms of infrastructure maintenance, but that seems not to be happening. So at the end of the inquiry, we then launched a report. That report was actually launched last week, Wednesday. And the report contains quite a number of recommendations that are directed to the state. And we currently in the process of actually engaging with the state to ensure that those recommendations are implemented. And that's been one of the huge challenges, I think, that we face as an NHRI in terms of implementation of recommendations. Because as I've alluded to, that in 2014, we did a report which was quite comprehensive, and we came up with a number of recommendations. And one such recommendation was actually that the state needs to pay attention to infrastructure to avoid water pollution. But now here we are again, some 6 or so years later, facing the same problem. But this time around, we're quite hopeful that the state might lend a listening ear to us, because I think they've realized that water is life, and it is important to ensure that our water resources are protected, because it is not only a human right, but it also ensures that future generations are also able to benefit. So I think I'll also be interested to hear how other NHRIs or even other stakeholders, what advice do they have in terms of fostering cooperation and implementation of recommendations, which I think is a common challenge, as I also noted in the publication, that NHRIs face when they deal with issues of water and sanitation. So maybe let me stop here for now, and then I'll be interested to listen more and also engage in a discourse at a later stage. Thank you, Al-Hassan.
Thank you so much, Pismo. This is really fantastic presentation in terms of challenging also what is happening on the ground and how we can learn from others what is happening in terms of government implementing your recommendation. Let's hope during the discussion we get to the bottom of this, and also how civil society can help to work with you to put pressure on government to implement this. I can see Alana Porter is also on this webinar. Maybe she can also supply some of the information they've been working in other communities in South Africa to address this kind of issues. So Our next presenter is Yuri Wondio and Christelle from Ivory Coast Human Rights Commission. Christelle will be speaking in French. So those of you who don't understand French like myself, who is trying to learn, there is an interpretation function. There is a globe there that you can click and select English channel so that you'll be on the English channel to get a simultaneous interpretation so that you understand what Christelle is going to tell us from Ivory Coast. Over to you, Christelle.
Merci, Al-hassan. Bonjour à tous et à toutes. Je suis Wondio Christelle du Conseil national des droits de l'homme, Côte d'Ivoire, CNDH. Tout d'abord, j'aimerais remercier les équipes de Human Rights Water et End Water Poverty pour cette initiative qui est salutaire. Alors, la présentation s'articule autour de 4 points. La présentation du Conseil, le cadre des rapports entre les INDH et les OSC, la collaboration entre les INDH et les OSC et enfin les recommandations. Alors, le Conseil national des droits de l'homme est une autorité administrative indépendante qui a été créée par la loi 2018-900 du 30 novembre 2018. Et donc, cette loi a remplacé la loi précédente sous laquelle fonctionnait l'ancienne institution dénommée la Commission nationale des droits de l'homme, CNDH-CI. Et donc, le mandat du CNDH lui permet d'exercer des fonctions de conseil, de mener des consultations, de conduire des missions d'évaluation, de faire des propositions au gouvernement et à toute autre autorité compétente, dans le cadre de la promotion, la protection, la défense des droits de l'homme. Et cela sur tout le territoire national, à travers nos unités opérationnelles, que sont les 31 commissions régionales des droits de l'homme, qui sont installées toutes dans les 31 régions de la Côte d'Ivoire. Ensuite, le 7 décembre 2020, le CNDH a été accrédité au statut A de la GANRI, l'Alliance mondiale des INDH, pour son entière conformité aux principes de Paris. Et il faut noter aussi que, conformément aux 10 principes, l'action du CNDH repose sur les principes d'indépendance, de pluralisme et de surveillance du respect des droits de l'homme. Et aussi, nous recevons des requêtes des populations ou des plaintes sur toute violation des droits de l'homme, aussi sur la question de la gouvernance de l'eau. Et donc, pour l'année 2020, le Conseil a traité 8 requêtes sur cette thématique, notamment sur l'accès à l'eau, la qualité de l'eau et l'état des infrastructures de distribution d'eau. Ensuite, concernant le cadre des rapports entre les INDH et les OSC, il faut noter que nous avons 2 dispositions. D'abord, au niveau de notre loi, la loi habilitante du CNDH, qui stipule que nos missions consistent aussi à entretenir des rapports avec les institutions et les organisations nationales et internationales intervenant dans le domaine des droits de l'homme. La deuxième disposition, c'est la section modalité de fonctionnement qui est stipulée dans les principes de Paris, qui invite les INDH à développer les rapports avec les organisations non gouvernementales qui se consacrent à la promotion, à la protection des droits de l'homme. Et je fais l'économie du paragraphe. Ensuite, nous partagerons notre expérience, mais d'abord dans le cadre de ces collaborations avec les INDH et les OSC, nous avons mis en place un cadre d'échange avec les organisations de la société civile à travers ce qu'on a appelé le Forum des droits de l'homme, qui est une tribune d'échange entre les OSC et le CNDH, qui est sous la forme d'un panel et de questions-réponses. Aussi, nous avons les rencontres thématiques, les rencontres des groupes thématiques, qui sont des rencontres organisées pour les OSC qui œuvrent dans leurs domaines respectifs. Nous avons des thèmes tels que les droits civils et politiques, les femmes, les enfants, la jeunesse, les personnes vivant avec un handicap, la santé, les médias, l'environnement, les prisons et lieux de détention, l'éducation, les forces armées, les organisations syndicales et le monde du travail. Alors, dans le cadre de nos missions telles que visiter les prisons et les lieux de détention, nous avons effectué une étude qui porte sur l'amélioration des conditions de vie dans les lieux de détention. Et à ce titre, nous avons fait une étude sur les conditions des mineurs qui sont privés de liberté et qui sont pensionnaires du centre d'observation des mineurs. Et nous avons fait une recommandation. nous avons attiré l'attention des autorités sur le fait que ces pensionnaires-là n'avaient pas un accès facile à l'eau pour leur hygiène corporelle. Ensuite, dans notre rapport annuel de 2018, nous avons invité à nouveau le gouvernement à améliorer les conditions de vie dans les lieux de détention, spécialement sur la question de l'eau potable. Ensuite, en termes de toujours collaboration avec les ONG ou les OSC, nous avons financé une ONG pour la construction d'une borne fontaine. Next slide, please. Et donc, dans le cadre de cette collaboration-là, nous avons lancé un appel, nous avons fait un appel à candidature pour financer le programme. Et donc, nous avons retenu 10 ONG sur 22. Et l'ONG Vision Nouvelle pour les droits de l'homme a été financée à hauteur de 3 millions de francs CFA pour la réhabilitation d'une pompe à motricité humaine dans le village de Guézem, qui est dans le sud-ouest de la Côte d'Ivoire. Et donc, en le faisant, l'institution voulait donner un signal fort aux autorités quant à la prise en compte de l'accès des populations à l'eau, qui est un droit de l'homme. Ensuite, nous avons des suggestions de moyens de collaboration entre les INDH et la société civile. On pourrait par exemple créer un mécanisme de INDH et OSC pour la gouvernance de l'eau. On pourrait instituer des formations pour les chefs de projet des OSC sur la gouvernance de l'eau, sur la gestion de l'eau. On pourrait aussi trouver des partenaires pour allouer des fonds aux INDH pour financer les projets liés à la gouvernance de l'eau pour le compte des OSC, comme nous l'avons fait avec l'ONG Vision Nouvelle, par exemple. Aussi, on pourrait mettre en place une stratégie commune de gouvernance de l'eau avec les OSC. On pourrait réaliser des études portant spécifiquement sur la gouvernance de l'eau. Et aussi, on pourrait réaliser des activités en collaboration avec les OSC. Et enfin, j'aimerais terminer par quelques recommandations. Alors, on pourrait inclure la question de la gouvernance de l'eau dans le plan d'action annuel des INDH. On pourrait aussi mener un plaidoyer par les INDH et les OSC pour l'adoption des textes internationaux indirectement liés à la gouvernance de l'eau, tels que le Pacte international relatif aux droits économiques, sociaux et culturels, PIDESC, et le protocole facultatif s'y rapportant. On pourrait aussi établir une interaction avec les structures en charge de l'eau en organisant des sessions d'information sur les nouveaux modes de gestion publique et démocratique de l'eau. Je vous remercie. Al-hassan.
Thank you so much, Christelle. That's a really great presentation, and I know people would ask you more questions, and it's good to see building across different constituencies from trade unions to schools and stuff like that. That's excellent work, and then we look forward to hearing more from other countries how this is working and how others can also learn from you. We are going now to Nigeria. From Ivory Coast, we are now going to Nigeria to listen to civil society organizations, how they are also approaching the Human Rights Commission to do work with them and work with communities to claim their right. So we've heard from National Human Rights Commissions. Now it's time to hear from civil society. Clinton, are you ready to unmute your mic and speak to us? If Clinton is not ready, probably we could start with some bit of questions and reflections. I saw a question that I guess, was it Lika who posed a question? It's more of a methodological question and it was answered, but it will be good to hear the rationale around this question. And do you want to speak about it, Amanda or Imanol?
Sorry, could you explain? Sorry, Sam. Al-hassan, could you explain the question?
So there's a question from Lenka, which says that the questionnaire and interviews with the national human rights institutions, did you have a chance to ask the participation national human rights institution if they were inspired by the first edition of the compilation? And if so, do you have examples from the second edition? Are you planning to monitor this in future? Or is the National Human Rights Institutions Water Initiative, if still functional and hosted by Right to Water, involved at this level?
Oh, okay. Happy to answer that question. So I think the purpose of this manual, and as we initiated the discussions with End Water Poverty last year about how useful it would be to review how many of these countries, the NHRIs, have progressed since the first edition, and that was the initial intention, and we certainly got in touch with each of them. And as you'll see in the second edition, we have an update from, I don't remember the exact numbers, but we have about 2/3 of them are updates from the same examples that we had in the first edition, and there were a few new ones. There are a few NHRIs that are very active and feature quite strongly in the report, and they're the same ones that were there before. So I encourage you to have a look through. What we haven't done at the moment is restart the NHRI Water Initiative. It's something that we are thinking about doing, and we've been talking to End Water Poverty about that. It's certainly something that we're looking at from a different angle. We're trying at Human Rights Water, we're working with a number of NHRIs, and we're developing a country program where we are working with NHRIs in different countries through our membership. So we're approaching it from that angle at the moment. We're building up, and my hope is that we may be able to develop something more strongly. This is like our first foray into the area of working with NHRIs by revising this manual. So hopefully it will lead on to other things.
Thank you, Amanda. Alana Porter, if are you willing to speak to some of the issues that you've been working with community? I know this question that Pismo raised around water pollution and stuff like that. What has been your perspectives with working with communities around this issue? Hello, Alana. Okay, if anyone has a question who wants to take the mic, just let me know, and then I'll allow you to speak. Kumbalana, I know recently you've been doing some work around this, and you have some examples on how you're working on the rights and claim your rights. If you're happy to take the mic, that is fine.
Al-hassan, McDonald has his hand up and has a question in the chat box.
Okay, McDonald, do you want to take the mic?
All right, thank you very much, Al-hassan. My question is directed towards the National Human Rights Institutions, where the question is around how familiar they are with the AAAQ framework on the right to water, which tries to understand the rights of, I think, 4 key areas around availability, accessibility, acceptability, and also quality. And if they are familiar with the AAAQ framework, what are maybe some of the experiences which they have in trying to localize the indicators? And as a framework, how useful is it in contributing to the monitoring role that national human rights institutions play when it comes to broader rights, which include the right to water? Thank you.
Thank you. I've seen Kumbalana, your hand is up, and can you also ask your question Pradip, you've also raised your hand. Can you ask your question? So we'll take 3 questions and then we come back to the panelists.
Thank you very much. I'm Kumbulani, and find out from the other national human rights institutions in terms of the mechanisms and methodologies maybe that they are using to measure the progressive realization of the right to water. Do they have maybe any instruments that they are using maybe to say we're using this to benchmark and measure how our nation is progressively realizing the right to water?
Okay, Pradip, do you want to ask your question and then we give it back to the panelists to address the questions? Pradip, do you want to unmute yourself? Okay, you can, over to panelists, you can start answering the question whilst we get to Pradip. Pismo, you want to start?
Thank you, Al-Hassan. Yes, I will just give it a first bite. Maybe to the first question, with regards to how familiar are we with the AAAQ. At the South African Human Rights Commission, yes, we are very much familiar with that. The framework, and it was one of the frameworks actually that we used, which I think is documented in the first publication, which we used for us to have the provincial and national hearings on the right to water. Whereby we're basically measuring the whole
Hello.
Hello, Pradip.
Yeah, this is Pradeep. Thank you so much for giving the opportunity. I'm so nice of you. But it's my question is to our community is half of the India and it's half of the Asian countries are likely to be drinking water shortage. Groundwater there is acute shortage, and it's getting the bucket of water. There is a line in it's Madras, in Chennai, and it's Bhubaneswar, and it's Berhampur, and there are many cities. And it's we are thinking this the situation will be like at Cape Town. What has happened during the last year and a couple of years. And if it is not available for drinking, I think it will violate the grossly this human interest. So how do we envisage to get the safe water for drinking? Apart from this is the sanitation. So survival is now this is the clean water. And during this pandemic and it's COVID-19, it's likely to be returned again. So that's how we can access and govern the safe drinking water. Do you have any clear messages? Because it is affecting the entire humanities, human interest. Survival is a question, and this is yeah. Thank you so much. Please, if you have any question, please anybody can also help me to understand that what would be the alternative strategies.
Thank you very much, Pradip. So back to you, Pismo. You can continue with your submission or questioning, answering the questions, and then we can go round to the other panelists to see what reflection they have on these questions.
Thank you, Al-Hassan, and thanks to Pradeep as well. So I was just responding to the question by Mr. McDonald. So I was saying that at the Human Rights Commission, yes, the framework of AAAQ is one of the frameworks that we have used and we continue to use, and we used it quite in-depthly during the 2014 National Water and Sanitation hearing reports, process that culminated in the report. So, and I think it is a useful framework because it gave us an insight into issues around availability of water, which is a huge concern, I think, particularly with regards to the universal coverage. And it's a huge challenge in South Africa because you find that those who are in the peri-urban and rural areas, they do not necessarily have access to water, and they end up drinking water from unprotected water sources. And I think if you go to the website of the Commission, you'll find that report. And we documented the experiences of the communities, issues around the gendered impact as well of the lack of availability of water and adequacy as well. And then there was also the issue of the quality as well of the water, which obviously, as I've indicated, that we are facing issues of infrastructure challenges. So it's really a useful indicator, and we have integrated it in our monitoring framework, maybe as a response to Kumbulani as well, because as maybe you might be aware, the South African Constitution provides that the Human Rights Commission has got powers to call government to account for the progressive realization of a number of socioeconomic rights, and one such right is the right to water. So we obviously send questionnaires to government, and we also do both the qualitative and quantitative assessment to see to what extent government is taking steps to progressively realize the right to water within, obviously, it's now the maximum available resources, I think, in terms of the general comments of the CSR. So those indicators are quite useful because they give us a picture of to what extent government has gone and whether there's been any regression. And I think with the right to water and sanitation in South Africa is becoming a huge challenge also, considering what I think Pradeep also indicated, the issue of water scarcity, because South Africa is one of those dry countries, as you saw with Cape Town, where they were even reaching day zero. So we need obviously to look at the alternative technologies, but ensuring that they are anchored on a human rights-based approach. So for now, maybe if I can stop there for now, and then I'll probably also respond maybe to the question, maybe just to respond quickly to the question that I see that Alana has posed on the impact and efficacy of the NHRI and how this could be improved. Yes, I think the NHRIs on their own, they can do so much, but they also, I think, need the assistance of civil society as well. Particularly, I think the major concern that we have is the issue of the implementation. So I think one strategy might be the issue of naming and shaming, and then the other strategy also might be the issue of the option of maybe civil society basically using the reports of the Human Rights Commission as well, maybe for purposes of building community empowerment and active citizenry, and even maybe litigating to a certain extent, because the Commission has also its constraints in terms of human capacity and resource constraints as well. So we really need to work hand in glove with civil society to ensure that the work of the Commission is bolstered, because ultimately we also rely quite heavily on civil society to ensure that our recommendations do get implemented, and they are the ones who can actually carry them forward. I think I can stop there for now, Al-Hassan, and I'll be happy to respond to further questions as we progress.
Thank you, Pismo. I think there are two other questions from Sanasur and Mohammed. And thanks, Alana, for your questions. So let's hear from Christelle, if you have some response on this, and that is important. And so do you want to give us your reflections on these questions, Christelle?
Yes. Yeah, tout comme Pismo l'a mentionné, le framework AAQ est très important. Le framework AAQ est très important pour le suivi de la gestion de l'eau dans un pays. Et donc, nous sommes familiers avec ce cadre-là. Ce que je voulais partager, c'est que nous, à notre niveau, nous faisons des études. Nous allons à la rencontre des populations. Nous conseillons aussi le gouvernement. Suite à toutes ces études-là, nous faisons des recommandations au ministère de l'Hydraulique, il y a à l'Office national de l'eau potable, à l'Office national de l'assainissement et du drainage. Et donc, nous supportons aussi la société civile dans toutes les actions qu'ils mènent et nous essayons aussi de maintenir une collaboration avec la société civile pour que le suivi de la gouvernance de l'eau soit une priorité en Côte d'Ivoire. Al-hassan, back to you.
Thank you, Christelle, for your answers. Sana, sir, do you want to ask your question, the one you put in the chat box?
Thank you, Al-hassan. Yeah, because you know that it's a good work. These the presenters, I'm really impressed. But in South Asia, the government they are very powerful, and we like a CSO, myself and other maybe 100 CSOs there across the South Asia. They are working, but we have no solid case study. So I'm interested African nation case study that how they mobilize and pressurize the government at the local level, at the grassroots level, at the provincial or sub-state level, or national or federal level. Because we like in Pakistan and India, we have a national government and sub-national government, and even we have a district government, and we have another tier, a local government. So I'm and my other colleague, we are interested a solid evidence, a practical step in which country, maybe in Nigeria, maybe in other countries, in South Africa, or other colleagues say, so we can replicate those study and work on the same line to mobilize and pressurize the government to for this human right to water and sanitation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sana. So, Mohammed, you have a question on Tanzania. Do you want to take the floor and ask the question on the Tanzania case?
Hello there, how are you? Thanks for the opportunity. As I have asked, it's very hard to engage with the national institutes because most of it is under the government. So it is hard to go there and ask them questions and everything. So I don't think how it is possible for someone to go there and ask them questions about their human rights.
Okay. Can I start from Amanda or Imanol if you want to take this question? And before then, can I ask Lenka to ask your question on the Côte d'Ivoire that you just put in the Q&A? Hello, Lenka. Do you want to take the mic?
Yes, sorry, I was looking for how to unmute myself. Yes, so we are struggling a lot with engaging CSOs with NHRIs or pushing them to submit the data they have and the information they have to NHRIs, because many are working in countries where there's shrinking civic space. So I saw that the Côte d'Ivoire NHRI gave some really great examples, but how did they manage to convince CSOs to engage in those mechanisms?
All right, so we hear from Amanda, starting from Amanda.
Hi, yeah, well, so the questions are all pretty similar in terms of how do you activate the NHRIs, especially in areas where there doesn't seem an obvious way of talking to them. And obviously there's no one solution. I can just give you some anecdotal information. For example, and we've had a few speakers from South Asia. We've worked at sub-national level in India, for example, with the state human rights institutions, which are much more approachable and actually quite willing to talk. We've had workshops with civil society and the the human rights institutions. We did ours in NHRI actually, but the national institution is more difficult to reach. It's more bureaucratic, but actually the state institutions can be quite helpful, and it is a more approachable level to engage with. So that's one idea. I responded to Mohammed earlier in the chat, and if you'd like to get in touch with us, we're actually just piloting a country program where we're trying to engage NHRIs with civil society through our membership program and country coordinators. So I can't say that it's going to be a silver bullet or anything, but if you'd like to have a conversation about your particular situation and how you may want to access the NHRI, we may be able to help. I don't know. And I think Lenka's question was pretty similar. It's quite difficult, especially in some countries where the NHRIs are either very small or very bureaucratic. It's sometimes very difficult to get in touch with them. And I think that our manual was around good practice NHRIs. So you're hearing from South Africa and the Côte d'Ivoire, which are NHRIs which are more active and engaged with civil society than others. And maybe they can give some of their experiences of how they've managed to make that possible, because they actually are very good at communicating. So if I can pass the floor to maybe Christelle.
Christelle?
Ok. Merci pour la question. Alors, la collaboration avec les organisations de la société civile, nous l'avons travaillé. Et aussi, nous offrons un cadre, aux organisations civiles pour pouvoir échanger sur leurs difficultés, sur leurs défis. Nous les invitons à mener des plaidoyers ensemble sur des questions très intéressantes. Alors, dans le cas de l'exemple qui a été donné, la collaboration avec l'ONG pour réhabiliter une pompe lors de la présentation, nous avons pris une part de notre budget pour pouvoir financer le projet de cette organisation de la société civile. Aussi, nous avons institué tous ces cadres d'échange tels que le Forum des droits de l'homme, comme je l'ai mentionné dans la présentation. Aussi, la rencontre des groupes thématiques. Nous les invitons, nous leur adressons des courriers pour qu'ils viennent et ensemble, nous discutons. Aussi, ça leur permet de rester en contact avec d'autres ONG qu'ils ne connaissaient pas, par exemple, qui travaillent sur la même question qu'eux. Et là, ils peuvent tous mener le plaidoyer ensemble auprès des autorités pour faire avancer les questions. J'espère que cela aide. Merci.
Fantastic, Christelle. That's a really good example on how. There's an echo, so I'm trying to find out where the echo is coming from. So thank you so much for showing us how this work with civil society is taking place in your country and how you're engaging them. Does any other panelists want to address any other question? If not, this is the time for you to kind of give us a bit of reflection, your general wrap-up reflection on the discussion today. Should we start from Imanol?
Yeah, sure. What question do I have to answer?
Oh, not question to answer, but in terms of your general feel, summarizing what we've discussed, questions that have arisen, things that we can work on and stuff like that. But I know that Alana, you've dropped in a question, probably if whether when peace it comes to you, you can address those questions that Alana has just dropped in the question and answer. Yeah.
Okay, sure. So my general feeling about the work I carried out with Amanda and the compilation is that obviously there are NHRIs who are much more active in terms of, as Amanda said, trying to answer the demands of civil society, and even in the way they have come back to us with more or less information, and that are looking for bigger collaborations with other NHRIs to learn new tools and methodologies. So I think there is an evolution from the first edition as well. I feel there are new NHRIs that weren't featured in the first edition, which is positive. We've seen some evolution in a few NHRIs, which is also something to consider. And I think, as going back to Amanda's point, I think some NHRIs are open to collaborate, so people should definitely go and try to make the most out of these institutions, which are there to uphold their human rights. And yes, that's pretty much what I would say.
Thank you. Pismo, there is a question from Alana Potai. She's wondering whether you could reflect on your sense of the impact and then efficacy of the South African Human Rights Commission and how this could improve. And also if you could reflect on municipal failure in widespread regression. Is clear local and national government in responsive government already intervened in the Val crisis a few years ago?
Thank you, Al-Hassan, and thanks to Alana as well for those questions. Yeah, so I think with regards to the efficacy, I think, yes, indeed, maybe there might be shortcomings here and there, but I think the work of the commission and its, I think, constitutional gravitas does assist, I think, in terms of highlighting, the systemic and endemic problems, which in this particular case might be the right to water. So I think the commission, by unearthing a whole host of systemic and endemic challenges with regards to the right of water, assists in terms of giving civil society, maybe if I can call it, for a lack of a better word, maybe ammunition in terms of them holding the state to account in terms of its progressive realization of that particular right. And then maybe with regards to the issue of the systemic and endemic failures in the local sphere of government, I really agree with Alana on that one. It's been really a huge challenge, and it's a cause for concern for the South African Human Rights Commission, and we have undertaken engagements with state actors, with the relevant state departments. Like in this case, it will be the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, with regards to how can local government be capacitated to ensure that it delivers on its obligations in line with the Constitution, because local government is the one that is at the coalface of service delivery, and if it fails, then the entire human rights and transformative vision of the Constitution will also fail. And I think with regards to the Val inquiry, we've actually recommended that the National Department does actually take its powers and use its powers to ensure that it intervenes. And this time around, the intervention should address the root causes, not make cosmetic changes. So I think what I would like to drive home is the fact that NHRIs on their own, they can only do so much. And the Human Rights Commission, that is the South African Human Rights Commission, is quite open to working with civil society, and our legislative framework actually mandates us to work with them. So we work quite closely with civil society, and Alana, we will be quite interested to work with them. We've worked with them in the past, and we are quite amenable to working with them. If they've got any projects that they want us to work with them, we're quite amenable and we are open to working with them. Thank you, Al-Hassan.
Fantastic. That is a good reassurance from Pismo there in terms of working with civil society. This is what we want to do. And this is the aim of this webinar, is how we can foster the relationship between civil society and then the National Human Rights Commission. And I guess, Alana Porter, over to you. When you get back, your colleagues in SA should take this opportunity and reach out to Pismo. I know you've been working closely with them already. So that is a really good outcome of this webinar. Great. Before Christelle comes on her reflections for today, I would like to ask Sam to give us a quick observation what happened in Nigeria with one of Water Poverty members' work on claiming your human rights to water and sanitation.
Thanks, Al-Hassan. And yes, sorry, I wasn't prepared, so I don't have a speech here, but I'll just try and give the update that Clinton, who was due to speak as the civil society representative, would have given, because I think it would answer some of the concerns perhaps that Shah Nasir, and very valid questions that Shah Nasir and Mohammed raised. So firstly, just to say thank you to Imanol, Amanda and Human Rights to Water for compiling this excellent report, and these presentations from the National Human Rights Institutions have been superb. But we're not just interested in documenting good practices. I think it's really important to say that we're also interested in creating new ones by supporting collaboration between commissions and civil society who have little or even no experience of working on the human rights to water. And Clinton's example from Nigeria is you know, a good practice that took a lot of perseverance and a lot of time to achieve. So very recently, the Nigerian National Human Rights Commission, which usually works on civil and political rights, they issued a letter of recommendation following a complaint from a community in Okigwe in Imo State, who have been without good quality water for a long time. And then I think it was a couple of weeks ago, they issued this letter of recommendations. And this is the first time that the Commission has issued a letter regarding the right to water. So it's genuinely groundbreaking work. And the state corporation, the Imo State Corporation, whom the letter was addressed to, have since pledged to fix the community's water supply. And we hope to see some progress on this in the coming weeks. But this wasn't an this was an imperfect practice. The community lodged the complaint in March, and so it's quite a long time since they've received a response. It took Clinton months of meetings and perseverance and real collaboration between Clinton and the Commission, who were really willing to work on this issue for the first time. And building capacity between the two and fostering collaboration to get this really excellent result. And as a result of it, the Commission then met with the state corporation, and Clinton met with the state corporation as well. And they had this really positive and progressive meeting where the corporation suggested that they email the water ministry and the director of the water ministry at the same time. So it's a really excellent example of how civil society and commissions who haven't previously worked on the right to water can do so. And I think we want to create more of these good practices, and we want to foster more collaboration. So we really see this report as the beginning, and we're very open to supporting more water rights advocates to learn from this experience. So I think, does that cover it, Al-Hassan?
Yeah,
obviously Clinton would be able to do a better job, but yes.
Thanks so much, Sam, for summarizing what Clinton would have said on this webinar. Christelle, do you want to give us your reflection of today and going forward, how work would pan out in Ivory Coast, and how we could also learn from you and reaching out to you.
Ok, merci Al-hassan. Alors, ce que je retiens de ce webinaire, c'est qu'il est très important pour les INDH de collaborer avec la société civile. C'est dans ce sens-là que nous ferons avancer la question de la gouvernance de l'eau. Et aussi, nous pourrons monitorer tous les cas de violation des droits de l'homme liés à la gouvernance de l'eau dont nous font part les différentes populations. Alors, il est aussi important de noter qu'au sein de notre INDH, nous avons un département spécial pour la collaboration avec la société civile. Et donc, j'invite toutes les autres INDH à pouvoir mettre en place un cadre de ce genre. Et cela facilitera la collaboration avec la société civile. Je vous remercie.
Thank you so much, Christelle. We would want to hear from Amanda, her reflection on today, and also going forward, you've been instrumental in writing this report and also bringing civil society and the national human rights institutions and personnel on this webinar. What's your reflection for the day?
Oh, thanks, Al-hassan. I think the interesting thing for me is that good practices don't mean, and I think Sam said this earlier, it doesn't mean perfect practices, but what we're trying to do is improve things. And so we're trying to give ideas for what, for both civil society and for NHRIs to start improving and finding ways of moving forwards. So even if it's a little step, even if it's an email to your NHRI, or even if it's the NHRI sending out more communications, if they can get ideas from some of the good practices that are in our manual or from some of the discussions today, then we've succeeded in helping to move a little bit further towards realizing people's human rights to water and sanitation. So I think a lot of the time the problems are so enormous, people feel like overwhelmed and there's nothing we can do. But actually a little step is really worthwhile. And then tell us about it so that we can share it on social media or on our news sites and in our next manuals. And more people will learn get good ideas of what they could be doing. So that was
Thank you so much from Amanda and her colleagues for putting together this report, to colleagues in End World Poverty, Sam, also project managing this process. We've come to the end of the day, and I think this is a fantastic presentation from Pismo, from Christelle and Imanol. Everybody has really chipped in. Thanks for all the participants who asked the questions and made it interactive and lively and not just one-way communication. It's been a kind of really give and take and in a very conducive environment, and I really appreciate the way we all conducted ourselves. And this is the beginning of the work in the wash sector. We are really good at writing human rights approach to water and sanitation in our documents. But when it comes to the question of working to get this human rights to water and sanitation implemented underground, we are sometimes a bit shy in being bold. So for us in EWP, this is the beginning, and we're going to make sure that through our campaign, Claim Your Water Rights, from Nigeria to Pakistan to India to Zimbabwe to Zambia, we would hold government accountable, and we will reach out to all the National Human Rights Commission to support their work and work with them to make sure that we can all realize this beautiful ambition that we have. But let me also remind you that this afternoon we have other case studies that we'll be looking at, which will be in the Spanish region. So if you are interested in hearing what the other regions have, join us this afternoon at 3 p.m. UK time. Am I right, Amanda? I got the time right? Yeah, so there will be interesting case studies to hear from Latin America. The session would be in Spanish, So if you want to practice your Spanish, you can also join the session this afternoon. And thank you all for spending the day with us. Unless anybody has a pressing issue, if not, we would be drawing the curtains to close. Yeah, thank you all and have a wonderful day. And see you in the afternoon, those of you who are joining the Spanish webinar. Bye.
Thank you.
Bonsoir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christelle. Ismail.
And to the interpreters, thank you so much for interpreting. Yeah.